Hey guys, and welcome to a new video here on Phloshop. My name is Joseph. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how you can change white to any color and even go an extra step to show you how you can add texture to that same image as well. So if you're going to be interested, do stick through to the end of the video and let's just jump right in. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to show you a couple of ways to change anything from white to whatever color that you want, and I'm going to show you a couple of ways to do it. The most important thing is your selection. You need to make sure that your selection is accurate so that when you're changing the colors, no one is going to know immediately that this isn't the original color and it has been changed to this, it has been changed to that. So make sure your selections are always on point. Now you'd see on the right hand side where the layer panel is, I have 3 layers. So I have the background, which is always the background. I made a duplicate of it and then I made the selection out of the copy of the background layer. And I also have a texture layer, which is just a texture layer. I have it because I want to see if I can add some texture to the background and just, add a little bit more interest to the image overall. So I'm keeping that here, and I downloaded it online actually. So if I go back, you'd see I just typed in BG texture and I just looked for one and then downloaded it. Actually, this one is from Raw Pixel. Probably you can check out Raw Pixel's website and see if there's any other texture that may look good for what you're planning on doing, but there are so many of them that you can go through. All right, so now I just want to quickly run through how I made a selection. So I'm going to go into channels and show you that I went through the red, the green, the blue, and I picked the one which had a lot of contrast, and then I made a copy out of it. So drag it down to the plus and that's going to make a copy, but immediately this is how it looks. The contrast isn't really strong, and so what I did was I hit Command or Control L if you're using a PC, and then I dragged in the shadows and adjusted the midtones a little bit and also increase the highlights. Whatever is black is going to hide whatever effect you're going to apply, and whatever is white is going to allow the effect to show through. So basically this is what I did, and I went back to use refine selections to refine the layer mask, and now this is what I have as the layer mask. Now that we have our selection done, the next thing is to put it on its own group, the selection I mean, because I don't want to be creating several adjustment layers. For example, if I want to use hue saturation to change the color and I shift it to whatever I want, I don't want to now, because you can see it's making her skin blue and then the jeans green, whatever. So if I move the layer mask, for example, on here, then now it's only visible on that. And then if I want to use maybe I want to create curves, for example, and then I create a new curves and then I do this, is affecting the entire image, and so now I have to move this layer mask as well onto the curves. This is so much work. Okay, so what I want to do is, instead of creating all these adjustment layers and adding the layer mask onto each layer, I'm going to create a group. So now what I'm going to do is click on the top layer and just press the group icon, and that's going to create a group, but there's nothing inside of the group yet. Okay, this is where we're going to keep all the adjustments that we're going to do to change the color. Now I want to move this layer mask and put it on the group. So just clicking on the layer mask and dragging it onto the group is going to move everything. Okay, it's going to move the layer mask from the layer 0 copy and put it directly on the group. If I had hit Alt and clicked on the layer mask and moved it onto the group, then it's going to make a copy of the layer mask and put it on the group. But because I know I want to get rid of this, all I did was just drag the layer mask and put it on the group, and now I can come and delete this layer because I don't need it anymore. So now inside the group, this is where we're going to change the colors and do all the fancy stuff. Okay, all right, so now I'm going to click on the group, click on solid color, and right now you can't see what it's doing because it's in the white or the grays. But if I go to yellow, for example, you can see that the color is showing through the background and the white top. So I'm going to press OK temporarily, and then it looks really awful. This isn't the finished work yet. Now that we have our color fill layer, right, I can click on the blending mode and then come down to multiply. Now what that's going to do is just burn the color into the white, and this is looking good already. Like, this looks like it's a done deal. We can move on from here if we want, and this is actually one method of changing white to whatever color. So I spent a lot of time working on the layer mask. So now that I put the color in the group which layer mask is on, I don't need to put a layer mask on the layer mask attached to the color fill layer. So what I'm saying is, I have the layer mask on the group and the color fill layer is in the group. So this layer mask is affecting whatever is inside the group, and currently the color fill layer is inside the group. and so the color isn't showing everywhere. It's just showing where the layer mask is instructing it to show through. Because this is completely flexible, I can go back, click on the color, and now choose something that I want. But you notice if I go darker, my layer mask doesn't look as clean as before, and that's because we're changing white to a different color. So as much as possible, try and stay within the bright colors. So maybe a color like this looks okay, right? Even if I go into the blues, this also looks really good. If I go into green, so far as it's bright, it's going to look good. But if I just darken it, it's going to look not so well done, right? In terms of my layer mask, you can go further and refine it if you want, but I know that I want to stay within bright colors, and so I didn't really take my time to refine the mask to cater for a darker color. All right, so let's just go through, and maybe I want to start with a color like this. I'm just increasing the saturation a little bit, so somewhere like this looks really good, and we can move on from here. So at this point, I like the color and I think I want to stick with this, but what I notice is it's looking flat. If I take the color off and I look at the image, you can see it has a little bit more dimension. Like you can see the shadows, you can see certain parts are brighter, certain parts are darker, and that's adding dimension to the image. But when I make the color layer visible, it almost looks flat. All the midtones and highlights have been merged into one. So what we need to do is just bring out some of the lights back into the t-shirt, especially. That's where my focus is on the most. So what I'm going to do now is create two layers, one to brighten and one to darken. So I'm going to create my first curves adjustment layer, and that's going to be to darken. So I'm going to rename this to darken. Now I'm going to drag this down, and already you can see is making the image look more 3D. It's increasing the saturation. Everything is looking more exciting, if I should say, right? Because we're beginning to see more depth in the image. All right, so this is cool. I kind of like it, but I don't want it to affect the highlights as much. So I'm going to double click on the layer, and this is going to open up the layer style. Now what I want to do is take these shadows out of the highlights, and so the underlying layer, I can start dragging this. Now when I'm dragging it, you can see something happening, right? Now you can see that the darkening is affecting everywhere because it's in the bright parts as well. But now that I'm limiting it, I'm taking it out of the whites. As I'm dragging it to the left, now we're in the gray area. You can see that we are limiting the shadows or the darkening into the darker parts of the image, and I kind of like it. But I want to bring it into the t-shirt a little bit. So I'm looking at this area right here, and I'm dragging it gradually, and I think at this point it looks good. So what I want to do is make it blend well. Now what you can do to make it blend well is by splitting this triangle right here. So when I press Alt, click on the triangle and split it, now it's going to even the transition a little bit more and let it look a little bit more organic, and that's what I like. So now I can drag each of them individually till I find a point that pretty much works well for the image, and I think this point looks good. So I'm going to press OK. Here's a before and here's an after. So we already have the darkening and the depth added. Now I need to increase the lights in the image. What I'm going to do is, instead of clicking the curves adjustment and then now going to brighten, I'm just going to set it to screen, and it's going to do the same thing as brightening the image. Okay, so I don't need to make any adjustments inside the curves. I can now, and it's going to be an added effect, but that's not what I'm looking to do. I just wanted to use the curves itself, set it to screen, and then brighten the image. Okay, but the same thing is going to apply. We're going to use a blend if option. So double click on the layer. The layer style is going to open, and this time we're going to go the opposite direction. We don't want the brightness to affect the shadows, so I want to take it out of the shadows. So clicking and dragging gradually, you can see the brightness is leaving the shadows, and that's what we want, because we want to limit the brightness just to the bright parts of the image. So I'm still dragging, and I think somewhere here looks good. I'm more concerned about the t-shirts again, not really about the background. So I'm going to press Alt one more time and then split this triangle, and then just fine tune it till it reaches the point where it looks a little bit more flattering. So I'm just moving each of them little by little, just like that. I'm trying to make sure I'm retaining a lot of depth in there. Somewhere like this works well for me, so I'm gonna press OK. Now here's a before and after. Now what I want to do is just take it out of the background. I don't think it's necessary for it to be there, so I'm gonna go onto the layer mask attached to the curves adjustment. I'm gonna hit B for my brush tool, set the flow to 100% and paint with black. So pressing X is going to bring the black to the foreground, and now I'm going to paint it out of this area. and that's because I don't want it to be visible in this area. I just want it to be in the t-shirt. So I'm painting it out of here. Anywhere else that I don't want it to be visible, I'm just taking it out. So just like that. So here's a before and after, and you can see the brightness is only affecting the t-shirt, and this looks really good. So this is the darkening and this is the brightening. If I group them and just do it before and after, you can see that we've added lots of depth and now it looks more realistic. So what if I want to change the color now? Maybe I don't like this color anymore. I want to change it to something else. I can double click on the color fill, and let's say I want something like this. Maybe a color, I think I like the color here. Okay, now I can quickly just go through a little bit because of the curves adjustment I made. I want to now play around with color a little bit and find what works with the adjustments I've made. So obviously if I go to bright, the brightening is going to be excessive, and I need to find a color that is a little bit dark so that the curves adjustments, so for example, if I go too dark, this is just too much. Now I just need to find a color where it's going to allow the highlights I have selected to show through a little bit. I'm thinking somewhere around here looks good. I'm just gonna press OK, and I'm okay with this color. Now what I want to do, show you another method. Okay, so we have method 1. Now I'm gonna group these within themselves, so Command G, and I'm going to name this MT1 for method 1, and I'm gonna hide that. So now all that we made has been put to the side. Now I'm going to show you how you can use hue saturation to also change the color when you have your selection done. So we are inside the same group. I'm just going to click on hue saturation. I'm going to click on colorize, and now I can move the saturation up and probably reduce the darkening or the lightness to a point where I think it looks good. And now I can find a color that I think I want to work with. So maybe let me just go back into a color like this, right? So now you can play with the lightness to the point that you think it looks good. So somewhere around here, adjust the saturation accordingly. So something like this. This is just too saturated, but kind of works. Let me go all the way and see. This is a little bit too much for my eyes. Just gonna bring the saturation down like so, and maybe even darken it a little bit more. Now I'm noticing the highlights and the shadows is not really as strong as before, but because I darkened the lightness, it's already added a little bit of a mood to it. So maybe what I can do is just again create another curves and darken it slightly, and then double click, go into blend div, take it out of the highlights, just like that. Press Alt to split it, just like that. Press OK, create a new curves, set it to screen, double click, take it out of the shadow, and split it as well so it blends in really nicely. I'm still trying to find an area that works really well. I think this is okay, so I'm gonna press OK, and again go back to my layer mask, press B, and then paint it out of the background, just like that. Okay, and there we have it. We've been able to change the background color in just a few steps. Maybe the opacity of the brightness is just too strong, so I can just bring the opacity down just so it blends in just a little bit more. And this is also another way of changing the color. So you can use, so let me just group this and make this, so Command G, and make this MT2. Now the third and final way is similar to solid color fill, but you're going to use a solid color and mix it up with the hue saturation. So I'm going to create a new blank layer, and again let me just fill it with a color like this. Okay, maybe a color like this, right? And press OK, press Alt, and then fill the background layer. Now you can see it's looking very similar to color fill process, but we're just filling a blank layer with color. Now the next thing I'm going to do is click hue saturation and just click on the clipping mask, and I'm going to clip it onto the layer below, which is the color layer, right? And I'm going to change the color layer to multiply, same process as the solid color fill, but with this instance, what I can do is now click on the icon of the hue saturation, and then now as I'm moving around, I can change the color to whatever color I want. So let's say I want to do a bright pink. So we can basically just choose whatever color we want. So again, I'm just moving the slider of the hue saturation. Maybe we can do like a red, okay? And maybe just bring the saturation down a little bit and also reduce the lightness. Now what I want to do next is just again add the curves adjustment that I did, but I don't know if I want to go through the entire process again. So maybe I'm just going to go to curves 3 and curves 2 in the previous group and press Alt and just make a duplicate and put it on top of that. I'm going to close this group and just check if it's making sense. So in this case, I like the darkening. I think it's really working well for me, but probably it's a little bit too strong. So I'm going to pull the opacity down, and I'm going to go into the curves 2, which is supposed to be the brighten, but I don't see any change currently. So I'm just going to go back into my blend diff and just move everything to the left. And now I'm going to start by moving it and adjusting to see where the highlight is, and just putting it at a place that I think will work well for me. So just moving it around, I think somewhere like this pretty much works well. So we're going to press Alt and split it at this point, and now just trying to find a balance where the highlight is going to show through pretty nicely. So somewhere like, yeah, something like this. It's kind of cool. So before, after, we have the highlight showing through, and we've been able to darken it a little bit. So these are the 3 methods. So I'm gonna group this and call this MT3, and we have 3 ways to change color. All right, so we have method 1. Let me start. So we have method 1, we have method 2, and we have method 3. All of them are using the same principles. Now, like I said, I want to add texture to the background just to see if I can add some form of interest to the image. I really like this color scheme, so I'm going to stick with this. Now I'm going to turn on the texture layer, and immediately you can see the texture is showing through. So I need to drag that and also put it inside of the group. So I'm just moving it up, and right there you can see it's showing through the background and it's showing through her top as well, but I don't want it to be visible in her top, just the background. I need to drag the layer mask because I'm going to modify that, put it on the texture layer, and now I need to paint with black over where her t-shirt is. Currently I don't really care about the way I'm painting because I can go back and refine the mask again. I just want to make sure I've painted it out of the t-shirt completely. So this is it. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, and now I'm going to make my brush smaller and just paint to bring the texture back, like really close to the edges. So something like this. It's pretty cool. Move on to the other side and do the same thing. Just like that. Staying really close to the edge of the t-shirt. Now I feel this area probably of the layer mask wasn't well done. So what I want to do is just reduce the opacity of the texture because it's looking too fake. So I'm going to first of all change it to, let's see, multiply. Yeah, multiply allows a shadow and things to show through, and this is beginning to look really cool, but I think it's too strong. So I'm just going to reduce the opacity a little bit like that, and I'm going to add levels adjustment because I want to make the darker parts of it a little bit darker. So I'm just going to move it in like so, just to increase the contrast and also make the bright points really bright, and just shift the midtones to even it all pretty nicely. And to me, this really works well. I really love it. Now I just need to refine the mask here a little bit, and I think it's from this particular mask. So I'm gonna go back, press B, make sure my brush is set to black, and then I can just refine the mask a little bit more. So I'm just painting over so the green doesn't bleed into it so much. It's not perfect, but you get the idea. Okay, so yeah, there we have it. These are several ways of changing your background layer. If I hide the method 1 and make the method 2 visible, the background still works. Go to method 3, the background still works, even though it might need a little bit more tweaking, but personally, because I customized it for this, I really like the way it looks. Okay, so let me just go back to the first one that we made, and we have our texture visible, we have the color change visible, and I just want to show you that all of these methods are basically non-destructive. So you can always go back and then change the color. So for example, I can just double click on the color fill layer, which is I think the easiest way of doing it, and just change the color to whatever bright color again that I want. So maybe if I just keep it at this brightness, I can just slide this all the way through. And bear in mind, some of the colors have different intensities, and so you might need to just go back and adjust the curves. That is the one for the darkening and the one for the brightening, just so it looks more realistic. But again, you can always change the color. So we started from this color and then we ended up with this pink color. We can even go down into the yellows. Again, it's too bright, right? So I just need to find a color that pretty much works well with the contrast that we added. So some of these things may need a little bit more refining, but you get the idea. It's pretty easy to do. Okay, so again, if I go back into the method 2 and also do the same thing, so when I make it visible and I go click on the hue saturation, I can now adjust the hue slider to wherever I want, and I can play with the lightness. I can even darken it a lot or brighten it like all the way, but basically you can move around. But you can see this one doesn't give you as much control as the very first method that I showed you, and it's just a little bit tricky. You need to play with it a little bit more, and that's why I don't use this one as much as the method 1. So again, I can show you method 3. Also, we stuck with the red. If I just click, so that for that one you can't click on the layer with the color. All you have to do is click on the hue saturation layer, and then you can adjust it. And this pretty much works well just like the color fill. So the process or the idea is the same. You just need to figure out what's going to work for you. And remember, you can always tweak the curves adjustment, add a depth the way that you want. But because this is what we settled with, or this is like the colored scheme that I like the most, we're gonna stick with this. So yeah, do tell me what you think about the video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like. Tell me how you're going to use it in your images, and if you do, tag me on Instagram at Phloshop so I can see it, comment, share, repost, whatever the deal is. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.